Welcome back to another Win-Grace Star Trek video. This one's going to be not a review, not a theory, just a plain old-fashioned off-the-cuff discussion on what I view to be the main problems with current Star Trek and why I think it's preventing us from enjoying it the way a lot of us older fans used to enjoy the classic Trek. Now, right off the bat, I want to say two things. I am not going to be addressing the animated shows. Lower Decks and Prodigy, I am enjoying them for their own merits, but I think these are completely new and completely different takes on Star Trek, and I don't think they really fall into the category of the old Star Treks in the same way. Because of that, I won't be calling them into question right now. I will only be discussing primarily Discovery, but also Season 1, especially of Picard, and that transition between Season 1 and Season 2. The other thing, I will not be blaming everything on wokeness, on agenda, on politics. While that may be a very large reason of why people aren't really jiving with the current Star Trek, that might be a big problem for a lot of people. I don't believe that is an issue that in and of itself would lead to this show being as poorly received if the storytelling was there, if the sci-fi was there, if that classic feeling was there. So right off the bat, throw that out. That is not going to be one of the things I'm discussing here as far as what I think needs to be changed to get back to that older feeling. So one of the main problems that I think is the characterization. Discovery and Picard have two big problems with characterization, but they're almost the opposite of each other. In Discovery, we've got a lot of these characters that are on the crew that we don't know. And what we do know about them is basically they are on Discovery. They are Starfleet officers, and that's about it. Obviously, we know Saru, we know Michael Burnham, we know Tilly quite a bit. Even characters that are, still pretty high up there like Stamets and Culber, we don't know much about them aside from their relationship with each other. And, Stamets has that whole spore drive thing, plus Culber died for a while. That's pretty much the crux of what we know about these characters, and we know a little bit, obviously, in Season 4 about Book and some of the new characters introduced. So I'm going to leave that there and now move back to Picard. What I think the problem with Picard is twofold. Obviously, that's a much smaller show, but for being such a smaller show, we also didn't learn much about the new characters in Season 1. Obviously, Picard in 7 of 9, we have all this, baggage of, 7 years. Well, not quite as much for 7, but Picard 7 years movies, we know a lot about them. The new characters we were introduced to, learned a little bit about their backstory. Season 1 ended. Season 2 picked up a year later, and somehow, in Season 2, they're trying to tell us that all these characters that only met each other for the first time in Season 1 a year ago have become the bestest friends. They're inseparable. They love each other to death. They know everything about each other. That's great. We, as an audience, didn't witness that. We never saw their trials and tribulations. We never saw them come together, grow, lose, aside from that little adventure in Season 1. So none of that rings true as far as the audience is concerned. It might ring true in their universe with each other, but when they say things, in Season 2 about Picard being like, oh, this is the finest crew I've ever had, we have no reason to believe that. We spent 7 years plus several movies with the TNG crew, watching them struggle, grow. In Season 1, they weren't the best of friends. By Season 7, they were hanging out. They loved each other. They, couldn't really work without each other. They had become a family. They had become this well-oiled machine. So that is something that we as an audience were shown, and it developed, and it grew, and we grew with them. You can't just tell us, like they're doing in Season 2, that these new crews have become the same thing, because that's the whole problem with storytelling that I think, is kind of obvious. It's show, don't tell, is the old adage. Well, they kind of told us and didn't show us, and I think that's also one of the main storytelling problems in Discovery for different reasons. So over in Discovery, obviously I know the big change here is they serialized everything. But by serializing everything, they are not showing us the interaction between the crew that we used to get in classic Trek. So, for instance, what I think would be a great way to learn about this, crew that we don't know much about besides Burnham, besides Saru, besides, a couple of the other characters, is we don't know much about them as individuals. So if we were to have some sort of sci-fi problem happen, let's say Discovery gets stuck in a subspace pocket and they can't escape, they all come to the conference room as they used to do in so many classic Trek shows. They sit down at the table and they all start giving their unique points of view from whatever they are. You know, you've got the medical perspective from Dr. Culber, you've got the engineering perspective from Stamets and or Reno, you've got the the astrology, not astrology, that's the wrong thing, the astrometric from, someone else in their crew. Saru's got his own thing. So they all have just different perspectives, and maybe they throw out some, back and forth on what they think the best course of action is. Stamets comes up with a possible solution, some tech thing. He does it. They agree on it. It doesn't work. It seems like it should have, but it doesn't. They come back and they're all defeated. Like, well, what else can we try? Maybe Saru says, this reminds me of a time back on Kaminar when such and such. He relates some sort of analogy, which reminds Reno of something. She, says, actually, that's a great idea. Why don't we do? She comes up with a way to improve on what Stamets did by what Saru said. They all came together as a crew, contributed their own individual perspectives, and that ends up working. They solve the problem together. We as an audience just spent a good hour learning and growing with the crew, seeing their faults, seeing their problems, seeing how they come together, seeing their own perspectives, and they just solved a problem. We now feel that. We feel closer with them. We now, a season down the line when one of the characters, comments that they've become such a great family, we've experienced that with them. We know that. We haven't been told they're a family. We've been shown they're a family and how well they can work together. And that's also a great way to see friction between characters, to see tension between characters instead of being told about said tension. And I think that leads us to the second problem. This one's more of a Discovery as opposed to Picard, because Picard's more of a limited series, miniseries sort of thing. But the sci-fi elements don't seem to be intrinsic to the storyline at all. And I know that's a little weird to say because they're always, out there solving galactic disasters and whatnot. But I think it's just like they're taking that, I'm picturing a cardboard background. So let's say there's a background from a play, and they're standing in front of a sci-fi background. That's not the important part of the show. And I'm not saying that was always the important part of the show in classic Trek either. There's a lot of personality-driven episodes. But I think the main difference here is the main crux of what Discovery is trying to do in their stories, especially in the last couple seasons, is tell these stories about each individual character. And by each individual character, I mean pretty much Saru, the ship itself a little bit, Michael, and Book. No one else really seems to have much agency, especially the two new characters they introduced last season and then did nothing with. Gray and, the not Dax, the Trill. Gray and the Trill. They introduced them and then did nothing with them. Why? That could have been some great new injection of storylines and characters, and then they went nowhere. But I think what their main problem here is they are just trying to show us the problems these crew members are facing. Grief, loss, identity, dealing with, something that's impossible to overcome without getting over yourself. Things like that, where that's not a great science fiction story in and of itself. These are great parts of science fiction stories, that if that was shown during a struggle to save the galaxy. And that's another problem. They don't always have to be saving the galaxy. Sometimes the stakes don't have to be so high. Sometimes the stakes could be, getting two members of a warring race to talk to each other, or, figuring out how to divert a comet without the debris smacking into the Earth. Things like that. They don't always have to be galaxy-ending events, which is another thing. They have to keep upping the stakes. And when they keep doing that, nothing seems real. Nothing seems impossible. But I think that's something they could change, but now that it's already 4 seasons gone, does anyone care enough about the crew of Discovery to want to get to this place? If they went into season 5 and they went through all of these suggestions I'm thinking about, having episodes dedicated to learning the crew and watching them grow together, this is the 5th season. They're already 1,000 years in their own future. Is it too late to salvage us as an audience caring about these characters if we don't already do so? I like Saru. I don't care about the Kelpian stuff, and that's really all he gets to do. Now, he is having this new relationship they were teasing all season with the Romulan woman, or Vulcan woman? Yeah, the Vulcan woman. I guess Romulus and Vulcan merged back together. So I don't, are they Navarans now? I guess you could call them Navarans. I don't know how it goes. But that's what I'm saying, is they're taking time out of a galaxy-ending event to have conversations about how he's feeling slighted by, when he asked out this woman. And you were having conversations taking time away from, they're specifically stating they have 3 minutes until thousands of light years are irrevocably destroyed. But they need to take 5 minutes to discuss the mental health of the ship's computer, which is great. That is a great storyline. I would love to see that as a storyline. But the way they're introducing it is like that's the most important thing. And these sci-fi world-ending, galaxy-ending events in the background are just there to say it's Star Trek. I mean, most of what the crux of these stories are could be done, and I know this is a something that's I've used in other videos, but they could be done in hallways on a CW show. They could be done in hallways on a soap opera. None of what they're talking about and going through in these episodes of Discovery, for the most part, really have to be done in a science fiction setting. They're made better in a science fiction setting because you can introduce some interesting conundrums like time travel, warp drive, planet-to-planet contact. But the fact that it's being set in space, in the future, on a spaceship, for the most part, is irrelevant to what they're trying to tell. And I think that's the main difference, because in classic Star Trek, they were obviously dealing with current day issues. They were dealing with grief, loss, identity, all those things. But in an interesting twist through the lens of science fiction. And these shows currently are not through the lens of science fiction. They are using science fiction as a cardboard backdrop to play out a melodrama. And if that's something that's enjoyable to you, I don't want to take that away from you. I'm not telling anyone out there, you need to hate Discovery, you need to hate Picard. I am enjoying Season 2 of Picard, even though it's completely, utterly unlike any Star Trek in the past. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm still allowing myself to enjoy it because I have disconnected it from anything that's come before, so it's no longer hurting anything that came before in my mind. I know for a lot of people it is, and if you can't get past that, more power to you. I don't blame you. But in the meantime, I think we have to take a look at what they're doing and try and figure out if there is a way to come back from the way that these characters have been characterized. I would argue with Discovery, probably not. Picard is only doing 3 seasons anyways. They've already announced they're bringing back the entire TNG crew, so that could just become TNG Season 8 anyways. In Strange New Worlds, if they've learned the lessons they seem to be kind of learning each season, and they apply all of those into Strange New Worlds, that might start out on the right foot to begin with. Discovery is probably far too late to ever claw its way back, unless it does go 5 more seasons, in which case this might just be the longest running growing pains of a Star Trek series we've had so far. Season 1 and 2 of TNG, Season 1 and 2 of DS9, probably almost an equal amount of episodes, 20 some odd episodes per season, so 4 seasons of Discovery is probably about that anyway. So if they could turn it around in Season 5 and keep going for several more seasons, there is small hope there. But I think the main hope we have right now to returning to the storytelling ways of classic Star Trek is Strange New Worlds. And heck, I think Prodigy right now, which I said I wasn't going to mention the animated stuff, is doing a pretty damn good job of that. Now, it's a lot more child-oriented, so that might drive people away, but I am enjoying that one even more than Lower Decks, I think, because Lower Decks, to me, is more like a Rick and Morty style animated series made within the Star Trek universe by Starfleet for Starfleet officers. That's how I'm viewing it. It's not canon to Star Trek, but it's made as a Rick and Morty style series within the universe itself, you know, for Starfleet officers who are in the know to kind of get it and laugh. So that's why I don't hold that one any ill will, because it isn't affecting anything. It's a fun, satirical look at Star Trek that isn't taking itself too seriously and doesn't need to be, because it's not really actually happening in the Star Trek universe. Anyways, I've rambled for a lot longer. Probably didn't end up going anywhere new. But until next time, computer and program.